Another day, another overblown controversy in gaming because overly sensitive journalists can't extrapolate legitimate data from their surroundings. What a time to be alive. Not too long ago, I covered Mordhau during the Indie Spotlight series. Mordhau, for those that don't know, is a medieval hack and slash game deeply inspired by the Chivalry titles, which is developed by Triturnion Games and independently published on Steam. I had overwhelmingly positive things to say about Mordhau when I covered it, because it is a fantastic game. The development team worked very hard on this project, and I had the pleasure of also conducting a Q&A with them to enhance the coverage overall. Well, flash forward in time, post-release, and the game is a phenomenal success. I did not expect such a large explosion in popularity, but Mordhau quickly became a Steam bestseller with over 50,000 players during its early days, and more recently, still cresting 15,000 concurrent players during peak hours. The game has a tremendous amount to offer, and it would be extremely difficult to make an argument against it based on gameplay or merit, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Enter PC Gamer. PC Gamer and a writer named Samuel Horty decided to publish an article called Rampant Racism and Toxicity Are Driving Players Away from Mordhau. Nice and provocative. Good start. But here's the problem. After even just a couple of minutes of rudimentary research, we can see that Mordhau's post-launch player base decline is actually less significant than many contemporary titles. If we take a look at a couple of major releases that hit the scene during a similar time frame, we can see something like Rage 2, originally peaking at 13,591 players with a recent high of 751. That's a reduction of almost 95% over the span of a month and a half. Let's hop over to Mortal Kombat 11. Originally hitting about 27,000 concurrent players on Steam charts, the game has now dropped to a 24-hour peak of roughly 3,500. That is approaching a 90% decline since the April release day. And now, if we look at Mordhau, we can see an all-time peak of 60,000 players and a 24-hour peak of 12,000. That change represents a decline of about 80%, which may seem substantial, but in reality, it is actually far better than many of its contemporary peers in the gaming space. Newly released games experience a large player base spike in their opening days, with a subsequent decline immediately after. It is a constantly proven phenomenon, and when accurately evaluating the game and the surrounding landscape, it is crystal clear that Mordhau is not losing players at a rate above and beyond what is considered normal. Right off the bat, this article is flawed, but there is plenty more to get through. At this point, I should clarify something though. I am in no way condoning or promoting hateful or abusive behavior in online games. No reasonable person does or ever would support that kind of thing, but this article deviates from focusing on the legitimate concern and effort of raising awareness in order to effect positive change, and pivots to malicious attacks on the developers of the title. I'll spare everyone the headache of just reading word for word everything that this journalist wrote. It's poorly articulated and badly researched anyways, but the gist of it is this. A great deal of time is spent highlighting individual instances of racism or toxic behavior to accent the point that the Mordhau devs are not doing enough to combat these types of people. And on that front, there may be some legitimacy here. Mordhau only recently added a toggle mute option and does indeed have an acknowledged lack of moderation staff, which the team is actively working on, but that's not the real point of the article. The real message and intended takeaway is this. With plans for playable female characters and a choice of ethnicity on the horizon, you can only create white male characters at the moment, I expect the vitriol to get worse. The Mordhau team seem to expect that too, and say their current plan is to let players disable these new options if they want. That goes back to a similar situation as the chat filters. Des Rosier says, I'm definitely mispronouncing that, I apologize. Whatever stance we take officially, some group of players are going to be upset with us, and so ideally we'd put the power in the players' hands and give them the option to enable and disable different things. This is where the most egregious falsification occurs. The writer is insinuating that the Mordhau team is creating a system deliberately to let players disable everything except for white males, but this is entirely untrue. If we trace back the origin of this claim, we find a forum post from a developer a few months ago. This is now the main bullet point that people are pointing to in order to justify their outrage. The post reads as follows. We are still looking into adding female characters post-release as promised. If added, they will be on par with the rest of the game and implemented properly to ensure that they are not a detriment to the atmosphere of the game. The voice acting especially will be crucial for this. The realism complaint is valid, so when we add them, we might add a simple client-side toggle for both female and male characters, which would let you disable them. This is the genesis of the claim that Mordhau developers are making a filter to exclude everything except white males from gameplay, and that is an entirely false position. The proposed and speculative system that is discussed in this post is a gender toggle that would flip all characters to either male or female. This is not a filter that would affect ethnicity in any way, but PC Gamer did not care about factual reporting, they care about outrage clicks. Immediately after this article was posted, Triternion Games made a public response. We at Triternion, and as a small indie team, have a lot to learn when it comes to dealing with toxicity/racism in a large community. However, we need to clarify some claims posted in an article today. We do not, nor have we ever, had plans to add a toggle to hide other ethnicities or disable characters that aren't white in Mordhau. Any claims to the contrary are false. Official statement coming soon. But this statement has not stopped people from pointing to the Steam forum post, which highlights the speculative client-side toggle, as proof of deception, even though it in no way corroborates, verifies, or supports the PC Gamer article's claim and does not disprove Triternion's position. This PC Gamer sentiment did not die there, however. Next to pick up the story was Kotaku. Again, it is a horribly written piece of subpar journalism, and I will spare everyone the majority of what was said here because it's painful to read, but here is the key paragraph. The PC Gamer story reveals that Mordhau, which only launched with the ability to build white male characters, is looking to expand its roster to include women and people from different races, which is cool, except the developers are so worried about upsetting their bigoted fans that they're planning, though not guaranteeing the ultimate inclusion, on adding a toggle for players to filter out those choices so that every character in the game is displayed as a white male, regardless of their rival's actual selection. Here again is where we see the perpetuation of an untrue claim designed to make it seem like the development staff themselves are deliberately catering to and constructing an environment for hateful individuals, which is decidedly untrue. Now, this is where the discussion needs to make a dramatic shift. A complete lack of any chat filter, report function, or mute capability can cause problems. In a mature rated game, I would argue that a chat filter that targets specifically curse words makes little to no sense, but I would not think twice if there were to be a filter of some kind. The same way I wouldn't think twice if there weren't. The addition of a toggle for muting players is important, however, and that is exactly what the Mordhau devs have added already. Give players the control over whether or not they can see communication from their teammates or their enemies. It is a logical step and one that is widely represented in games nowadays. The next step, however, is a chat filter, and this is where things get a little bit more tricky. Implementing a chat filter is not something that would surprise me, but when you choose to do this, there are side effects. First, as the Mordhau devs themselves rightfully stated, players simply circumvent filters. But more importantly, if you implement a filter, it can and often does lock down accidental and unrelated communication. Here's where Warframe is a good example. In Warframe, an aggressive chat filter was imposed that was then weaponized by a small set of region chat moderators who did not like the phrase "Neza is a trap." Whether or not you believe that the phrase is inherently transphobic or harmless is irrelevant here, because the side effect I want to focus on is that linking two innocuous items in the same sentence, the frame Neza and a kinetic siphon trap, would result in a player's suspension from region chat. Another example would be Battlefield 5, where the term white man was purposefully censored out, as was the term DLC, but all other colors as a prefix to man, and likewise using the word free in front of the word DLC, remained unmoderated. Chat filters are a largely imperfect solution to a problem that is constantly evolving. One day, a particular set of words are considered hateful and deserving of moderation, but the next day, the rhetoric has shifted, or a meme has arisen, or anything like that is deemed offensive and then gets corralled under the umbrella of the chat filter. The most effective and least invasive solution that covers all bases is to allow players to mute one another. Now, though, we enter into the realm of player choice. Player choice is an important phenomenon in gaming. Players wish to choose their character, their loadout, their skills, abilities, and anything else that is made available to them. Mordhau and its development team proposed a speculative system in which, when they have added female characters that is, a player could toggle client-side what they see. If you want to fight as and against only women, you would be able to do that. If you wish to flip that experience and fight against only men, also possible. But this element of choice to modern games journalists is unacceptable. In theory, this would be received by journalists and outrage peddlers under a very positive light. In the recent climate where Call of Duty Modern Warfare has attempted to portray the gritty, morally ambiguous real-world circumstances of conflict, journalists decried the game as jarring and too offensive. One of their primary reasons for doing this is because there were female combatants. So an option to remove female combatants from the gory medieval combat landscape of Mordhau should theoretically be appealing to them. Nope, because the duality of the system allows for an individual player to choose either male or female, the speculative system is attacked, lied about, and demonized. The idea of individuals having the option of choice is unacceptable to this new age of journalist and social justice fanatic because the potential exists for another player in some entirely separate location with no effect on them whatsoever to choose something that they dislike. Here is a perfect example. This is feminist frequency. which is broke, by the way. Go figure, because people don't like aggressive ideological agendas shoved in their face all the time, but whatever, moving on. This is Feminist Frequency, Anita Sarkeesian's failing company. The position that Feminist Frequency takes here is that it is sad Dishonored 2 did not make the full switch to a female lead, but Dishonored 2 has a fully functional choice between male and female characters. You can play as either a man or a woman, each with their own lore, voice acting, and atmospheric components. It is up to the player. That is not what they want. They wish for games to disallow the use of male characters, period. For further evidence of this, we can see the E3 gender graph from Feminist Frequency, in which Anita Sarkeesian asserts that this is the second worst year for female representation. But if you possess even a modicum of intelligence, you can see that the graph actually shows a sharp increase in choice-based RPGs, where players can select either a male or a female character, and that the exclusively female representation is down overall, but so is the exclusively male representation as well. The end result is that the instances of female playable characters in gaming has dramatically increased over the past few years. She is directly advocating against player choice in favor of forced exclusivity for one gender, and yet, the same type of ideological activist writers that support her agenda are outraged over the speculative inclusion of a male-female client-side toggle. This is where the contradiction becomes unavoidable. When advocating that games should have only female representation, and a potential option is brought up which would put the power to create that scenario in the hands of the player, instead of rejoicing because the goal of having exclusively females in video games now exists for Mordhau on a player-to-player basis, these outrage-fueled lunatics pivot to apprehension because the possibility that another player in the isolation of their own home, environment, and game might choose a different option which they disagree with, even when they would not even be aware of that choice themselves. Make no mistake, the social justice narrative of inclusion and tolerance, though it may have fundamentally began from a position of true value back in the day, has turned into a delusional, hypocritical, and dysfunctional ideology that is riddled with internal and irreconcilable contradictions. What we see now is weaponized intolerance, used as a club to subdue or beat down anyone who not only diverges from what they consider to be right and true, but also anything that represents the option for a player to select or decide something that might deviate from what they consider to be correct. Using intolerance to aggressively modify what others do, say, or even can do and say before it has even been spoken or acted upon through a subjective lens as a function of perceived or speculative potential intolerance is like trying to modify all of life into a multiple choice test, but then failing a student during that test before they have even answered the questions, because they might get them wrong. Mordhau has already implemented a mute button, which is very good. If they decide to add a chat filter with standard and widely utilized filter words, I wouldn't really bat an eyelash, honestly. But if they decide not to add that filter, it is equally as uninteresting and inconsequential. If they add a system wherein players can toggle to all male or all female characters, what does it matter? Some players will flip it one way, others another for different reasons, and no one will ever even know about it. You won't see me or probably anyone else outraged because Anita Sarkeesian or Samuel Horty toggled to all female. It's a non-factor. The PC Gamer article, subsequently followed by Kotaku, shamelessly lied and misrepresented the Mordhau development team's position. They are not credible, reliable, or honest. They are ideologically driven by the desire to modify anything and anyone that diverges from what they deem to be acceptable, either through shame, force, or both. That's it though. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. I have started advertising the Patreon page now because YouTube dings some of the videos as inappropriate, but I want to be 100% clear here. Supporting is entirely optional and not actually integral to the channel. I will continue to produce the exact same type of content on pretty much the exact same schedule, regardless of what happens with that. I spend the money on snacks and beer most of the time, so it's linked down below if you're interested, but it's not at all required. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.